It was 6:17 am when the kettle began to whistle. Evelyn Harper moved through her kitchen like muscle memory. She turned the flame off, poured the hot water into her chip blue mug, Frank's old one, and dropped in a bag of chamomile. Even her tea choices had shifted over the years. Less caffeine, less excitement, more quiet, more calm. That's what she told herself. Anyway, outside the window, Maple Street was still asleep. Frost laced the edges of the glass, and the neighbor's porch light blinked faintly through the cold. The world hadn't fully woken up, but Evelyn had. She always woke up early. Nurses never really learned how to sleep in. The scent of peppermint creamer lingered from the refrigerator as she prepped her lunch: turkey sandwich, carrot sticks, and a single square of the dark chocolate folded in wax paper, an indulgence, but she figured she'd earned it. In the hallway, the door to the guest room stood slightly open. A row of children's shoes, tiny boots, and pink ballet flats lined the wall underneath the coat rack. She kept them there just in case. It had been over a month since Luke and Emma had stayed the night, but Evelyn couldn't bring herself to put the shoes away. As she packed her tote bag with a fresh pair of scrubs, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Hey Mom, can you send $200? Olivia's car battery died. I'll pay you back Friday." Evelyn stared at the screen for a long moment. "No, good morning. No, how are you? Just a request. Another one." She didn't hesitate. She never did. "Of course, sweetheart," she replied, and with a few taps, $200 disappeared from her account. Scene shift: hospital corridor. St. Mary's Medical Center. The hallways of St. Mary's smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. A child's laughter echoed from pediatrics. Somewhere down the corridor, a code was called. Nurses rushed into motion. But Evelyn moved with grace, calm and unhurried. At her age, she'd seen everything twice. "Morning," Evelyn called out Julia, a young nurse with her hair in a messy bun. Evelyn smiled warmly. "Morning, Julia. Room 208 needs a BP check. Mrs. Harmon's swelling again." "Already on it." Julia grinned. "You're the real MVP around here." Evelyn chuckled but waved it off. Compliments made her uncomfortable. Her badge still read "Charge Nurse" in fading gold print. 38 years, one hospital, 2 generations of patients. She'd once delivered a baby for a girl whose mother she'd helped recover from pneumonia a decade earlier. Patients adored her. Staff respected her. But no one ever asked her what she needed. Flashback: a mother's sacrifice. She still remembered the day she gave Daniel the money for his Westfield house. It was spring then. Dogwood trees in bloom. He'd brought Olivia over for dinner, salmon and wild rice, because Olivia didn't eat red meat, and halfway through dessert, Daniel mentioned they'd found the perfect home but were a little short on the down payment. Olivia smiled that tight, polite smile of hers. Evelyn didn't even wait for the ask. "I can help," she said. "It's what Frank and I saved for. After all..." She didn't tell them it meant cashing out part of her 401k, didn't tell them she'd cancel her long-dreamed cruise to Alaska. She just smiled. Daniel hugged her. "You're the best, Mom." Back to present home. Nightfall. That evening, Evelyn returned to a quiet house. Her knees ached, and she pulled off her shoes at the door, rubbing her ankles with slow fingers. Dinner was soup from a can. Chicken noodle. She ate it over the sink, absent-mindedly watching the steam curl against the window pane. Her phone buzzed again. Olivia, this time. A photo of Luke holding a school project. Won 3rd place at the science fair. No invite to come see. No thank you for the new sneakers she mailed last week. Just a photo. Evelyn replied with a heart emoji, then placed the phone face down on the counter. She looked at the Christmas lights still in the storage bin by the stairs. Maybe this year she wouldn't bother putting them up. She turned off the lights, walked up the creaky stairs, and crawled into bed. Her final thought before drifting to sleep. If I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone notice before the bills were due? To be continued in Chapter 2, the party. She wasn't invited to where a single phone call changes the course of Evelyn's life forever. It was the third Thursday in December when Evelyn took the roast out of the freezer. She held it in her hands for a moment longer than necessary, watching the frost melt into the grooves of the butcher paper. It was a bone-in rib roast, Frank's favorite, and every year since his passing, she'd made it for Daniel's family Christmas Eve dinner. This year would be no different, she thought, or so she hoped. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic as she minced herbs by the window. A soft snow had begun to fall over Maple Street, dusting the porch in a white that made the wooden steps creak with cold. Her tree was up, lights twinkling softly. Beneath it, wrapped gifts waited patiently, an astronomy kit for Luke, a soft cashmere scarf for Olivia, and a vintage chess set Evelyn had found for Daniel, just like the one he used to play with Frank as a boy. She was placing her crystal wine glasses on the dining table, real crystal, a wedding gift from 1979 when her phone rang. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, smiled reflexively, and answered, "Hi, Olivia. How's everything?" There was a pause, the kind of pause that puts tension in your shoulders before a word is even spoken. Olivia's voice was even, rehearsed. "Hi, Evelyn. I hope you're doing well. Listen, Daniel and I were talking, and we wanted to be honest with you." Evelyn instinctively sat down, one hand still on the wine glass. "Of course. What's going on?" Another pause. "We think it would be best if you maybe set this Christmas out." Evelyn blinked. "What?" "It's just, we're hosting something very modern this year. Sleek decor. Cocktails. Some of Daniel's clients coming by. We're curating the atmosphere, and we didn't want you to feel out of place." There was a ringing in Evelyn's ears. "Out of place," she repeated, her voice small. "We just didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. You know how tight these gatherings get, and last year, the casserole didn't really land." Remember that Evelyn said nothing. It's nothing personal. It's just for the aesthetic and experience. Aesthetic, experience. Words that belonged on a Pinterest board, not in a conversation about family. Evelyn cleared her throat. She wouldn't cry. Not now. "Well," she said softly, "I hope it's lovely. I'll stay home then. Thanks for understanding. We'll stop by after the holidays. Maybe do a brunch or something casual." Casual. That word stung more than it should have. When the call ended, Evelyn sat at the table in silence. The roast still marinated on the counter. The fudge she'd spent all morning making sat cooling, untouched. Gifts under the tree looked suddenly ridiculous. Scene shift Christmas Eve. Evelyn's living room. The TV flickered with It's a Wonderful Life. Snow was falling steadily now, coating Oak Ridge in silence. Evelyn sat curled under a crocheted blanket with a carton of Chinese takeout on her lap. She hadn't even lit the candles on the mantel. Her eyes were glassy but dry. She refused to give them the satisfaction of tears. Every year, she played hostess, cleaned the house, made meals from scratch, bought thoughtful gifts. And this year, her reward was a phone call that told her she didn't match the decor. Her phone buzzed. A photo from Olivia Daniel and the kids in matching pajamas. Gathered around the fireplace, a caption, "Merry Christmas from the Harpers." No mention of Evelyn, no tag, not even a text to say they missed her. She closed the phone and turned the volume down on the movie. Even George Bailey's desperate bridge cry felt hollow tonight. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She walked to her closet, pulled out the small envelope marked Alaska Fund, and counted the bills. She had once dreamed of seeing the Northern Lights with Frank. When he died, she kept the envelope anyway. Tonight. She tucked it into her coat pocket and whispered, "Maybe next year." Ending thought. She didn't know it yet. But this was the last Christmas she would ever spend waiting for someone to value her. And the first one she would begin learning how to value herself. Next up in Chapter 3, Breaking the Pattern. Evelyn says the word she's never said before. No. And for the first time, The world doesn't end, it begins. It started with a casserole. Evelyn was standing at her stove stirring her famous sweet potato and pick and bake Luke's favorite when the phone rang. She glanced at the clock. 5:42 p.m. Daniel. She wiped her hands on a towel and answered. Hey, sweetheart. Daniel's voice came through, rushed and casual, like he'd been practicing charm in the mirror. Hey, Mom, listen, do you have a minute? Of course, is everything okay? A long exhale. She knew that sound. That meant a request was coming. So, Olivia's car battery died. Then my card got declined at the shop, which is just temporary, I swear. Can you spot me $200 just until Friday? Evelyn stirred the pot slowly, steam rising into her face. I just sent you money last week for Emma's school trip. Right. And I really appreciate that. I do. But this is just a quick thing. I'd ask Olivia's folks, but you know how her dad is. Evelyn paused. She could feel something rising in her chest. Not anger, but something stronger, something deeper. Weariness. Not the kind a nap fixes, the kind that's built over years. Danielle, she said gently, have you looked at how many times I've sent you money in the past 6 months? There was a beat of silence. She could almost hear him blinking. Wait, what, are you keeping track or something? I had to, she said, because I realized I'm not just your mother anymore. I'm your fallback plan. His voice tensed. So now you're telling everything I thought you helped because you wanted to, not because you expected something back. Evelyn turned off the burner. I helped because I love you, but love doesn't mean erasing myself. Wow, he muttered, his tone sharpening. That's cold. No, she said firmly. It's clear. Scene shift, Evelyn's bedroom. Later. That night. The room was dim, lit only by a salt lamp and the soft hum of the heater. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed with a yellow legal pad in her lap. She flipped open her bank statement and began to write. January $350 credit card payment. February $100 Olivia's work uniform. March $500 school tuition deposit. April $200 Daniel's car repair. May $100 groceries. June $150 summer camp. July $400 gambling debt. He called it bad luck at the casino. The list went on. 12 months, nearly $4,000. Her hands shook as she put the pen down. She didn't cry. She felt awake. Flashback. The cruise. That never was. She remembered her conversation with Frank years ago, just after his heart attack scare. He'd held her hand in that hospital bed and whispered, when I'm better, let's go see the glaciers. Just you and me. Ev. She had nodded, tears in her eyes. But they never made it. Life got in the way, bills, Daniel's schooling, then the funeral. She stood now and opened the top drawer of her dresser, tucked in the back. Behind some old greeting cards was an envelope marked Alaska Fund. Still there, still waiting, just like her. Scene shift, St. Mary's Medical Center, the next morning at work. Evelyn was quiet. Julia, her younger colleague, noticed. You okay? You're usually the one making me coffee. Evelyn smiled faintly and handed her a clipboard. Just thinking. She moved through the rounds smoothly, but every patient's name felt like background noise. Her mind kept drifting not with regret, but resolve. During her lunch break, she sat alone in the break room, scrolling through support groups for caregivers. She paused at one listing, Women Who Gave Too Much, Thursday nights at First Street Chapel. She bookmarked it. Then she dialed her financial planner. Hi, Janice. It's Evelyn Harper. I think it's time we make some changes. Closing thought for decades. Evelyn had been everyone's cushion soft enough to break their fall, but soft things wear down. And this time, She wasn't breaking. She was beginning. Next up in Chapter 4, The Withdrawal, Evelyn finally takes back what was always hers, her peace, her finances, and her voice. The first thing Evelyn did on Monday morning was close the joint account. The banker at Oak Ridge Savings Matt, a polite young man with gelled hair and an over-rehearsed smile, didn't ask too many questions. But when he pulled up the statement, history, his eyebrows briefly lifted. "Are you sure you want to remove Daniel Harper as an authorized user?" Mrs. Harper Evelyn met his eyes. Her voice was calm, almost casual. "Yes, effective immediately." She left the bank with a fresh statement folder and a silence that followed her all the way to her car. It wasn't a triumphant feeling, it wasn't vengeance. It was a relief. For the first time in years, her money was hers again. Scene shift, Evelyn's kitchen. That night, the roast was still in the freezer. Evelyn left it there instead. She made scrambled eggs and toast. She ate it on the back porch, wrapped in a cardigan, watching the neighborhood lights flicker on one by one. She thought about all the ways she'd said yes over the years. Yes to late-night babysitting, yes to car payments, yes to just a little help on the credit card bill, yes to Olivia's gallery fund, yes to Daniel's poker debt that he called a loan mistake. And now, for the first time finally, she had said no. She went to the closet, pulled out the holiday decorations she never used, and began filling donation boxes. Garland, glittered reindeer, the Santa cookie jar. Gone. She replaced them with a set of potted succulents from the garden shop downtown and a scented candle labeled Peaceful Cedar. It was symbolic, but it was also practical. The house didn't need to be festive. It needed to be hers. Dialogue, the fallout. The text came in that evening, first from Daniel. "Seriously? You froze the account. You couldn't even talk to me first." Then another. "I thought you wanted to help." "What? Was it all a transaction to you?" Evelyn didn't respond. An hour later, Olivia says she always knew you were bitter. She stared at the screen, heart beating faster than she wanted it to, but she didn't respond to that one either. She simply turned off the phone and placed it in the kitchen drawer. Then she poured herself a glass of the $14 Merlot she usually reserved for guests. She sat by the window in her reading chair and took a long sip. "This is mine," she whispered aloud. "All of it. The money, the silence, the glass, the choice." Symbolic scene, a new home ritual. The next morning, Evelyn walked into her bathroom and took a long look in the mirror. Her gray hair was pulled into its usual loose bun. Her eyes were soft but alert. There was something new in her reflection, not anger, not even sadness. Resolve. She took down the framed photo of Daniel's wedding, the one where Olivia had cropped her out for the Facebook version, and replaced it with a picture of her and Frank from 1985 standing on a hiking trail in Shenandoah, young, laughing, no filters, just joy. She stood back and smiled. Later that afternoon, she called the local women's resource center and offered to volunteer on weekends. She still had love to give. But from now on, it would go where it was wanted, not expected. Closing thought. Evelyn hadn't cut ties to punish. She cut them to breathe, and in the quiet space that followed, she began to remember who she was before she became everyone else's safety net. Coming next in Chapter 5, Isolation and the Spark of Freedom. Evelyn begins to rediscover herself, one unexpected friendship and one unexpected man at a time. The first week of silence was loud. There were no texts, no passive-aggressive phone calls, no "can you pick up the kids" or "we forgot the grocery list." It was the kind of quiet Evelyn had once longed for in the thick of her overextended life, but now, in the space that followed her decision to step away, the silence felt unfamiliar, even alien. She sat at the kitchen table in the early morning, coffee in hand, staring out the small patch of yard where the snow had just begun to melt. Her bird feeder swung slightly in the breeze, A single cardinal landed, red and proud against the grey sky. Evelyn smiled faintly. Well, at least someone still comes around for a visit. Seeing the women's group at First Street Chapel Thursday night, she walked into the First Street Chapel community room with her hands tucked into the sleeves of her cardigan. The chairs were set in a circle. A dozen women sat with coffee cups and heavy eyes. Some wore wedding rings, others didn't. Most looked like they'd carried the weight of other people's lives on their shoulders far too long. The facilitator, a warm-voiced woman named Claire, smiled gently as Evelyn took a seat. "We're glad you're here. Evelyn, take your time. Share when you're ready." For most of the session, Evelyn just listened. One woman described caring for a husband who had Alzheimer's for 11 years before he forgot her name. Another, a retired teacher, spoke about raising 3 grandchildren after her daughter's addiction spiraled. And when it came to Evelyn, she said only this: "I stopped being a person. Somewhere along the way, I became a wallet with a heart." The group nodded. No one laughed. No one judged. Claire offered a soft, knowing smile. "Sometimes, stopping is the bravest thing we ever do." Evelyn nodded back, tears welling in her eyes for the first time in months. They weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of relief. Seeing the man at the hardware store. Saturday afternoon, Evelyn drove to Parker's Hardware to pick up a new light fixture for the laundry room. She had spent the morning cleaning out the guest closet, boxing up old things she no longer needed, including Olivia's forgotten yoga mat and Daniel's high school letterman jacket. As she browsed the lighting aisle, trying to figure out the difference between LED strips and soft whites, a voice behind her said, "You're either building a spaceship or replacing a hallway bulb." She turned, surprised. A tall man with kind blue eyes and a weathered face smiled sheepishly. "I'm betting hallway." Evelyn gave a short laugh. "Laundry room, actually." The old one flickers like it's trying to summon ghosts. He grinned. "I'm Joe. I used to be an electrician before I started fixing sprinklers. Retired now, sort of." They chatted for a few minutes. Joe helped her pick out the right bulb, even offered to install it for her no charge. "Unless you've got coffee." Evelyn politely declined the help, but she noticed something rare in him: no pressure, no agenda, just presence. Before leaving, he handed her a card. "If you need anything fixed, I'm around. Just don't ask me to cook. I make terrible eggs." Seeing the journal by her bed. That night, Evelyn sat in bed with the journal Rosa had gifted her. She stared at the first blank page for a while, then slowly began to write. Day 1. No guilt, just quiet. "I met someone today who didn't need anything from me, and that felt new and good." She paused. "Also, I think I'm going to start painting again." Seeing the phone call that didn't break her, the next morning, her phone rang. Daniel. For a moment, she stared at the screen. Her finger hovered over the red button. She answered. His voice was shaky. "Mom, I'm in a really bad place. I know you're mad, but I'm trying. I swear." Olivia left, took the kids to her mother's, and I've been going to these meetings. Evelyn sat down, holding the phone gently. "Are you safe?" she asked. "Yeah, for now. I miss you, and I'm sorry for everything." Her throat tightened. "Thank you for saying that." "Daniel, can I come by?" Evelyn closed her eyes. "Not yet," she said softly. "But I'm glad you're trying. That's a start." And she meant it. She meant every word. She didn't owe him rescue anymore, but she could offer him hope at a distance. Closing thought. She had lived for others for so long. She'd forgotten what it felt like to simply live for herself. But in the stillness, in the absence of demand, Evelyn found the beginning of her own story. Coming next in Chapter 6, Forgiveness on Her Terms, Evelyn rediscovers joy, connection, and a future that belongs to her and no one else. The wind outside Evelyn's window had changed. It was no longer sharp and biting, but crisp bracing in a way that woke her up and reminded her the seasons had turned. Spring was on its way. The frost had receded, the snow had melted, and inside her little house on Maple Street, something else had thawed, too. Her heart. Not all at once, not in some sweeping cinematic revelation, but in slow, quiet inches, like sunlight warming a windowsill that had been cold for years. Seeing brunch with Rosa and Joe, Evelyn stirred lemon zest into pancake batter while Joe, now a regular visitor, attempted to set the table without breaking anything. "Forks on the left." "Right?" he asked, holding a handful of silverware like it was a science experiment. "You were a firefighter, Joe. You rescued people from burning buildings. Surely you can conquer a breakfast table." He grinned, placing everything backward anyway. Rosa arrived a few minutes later, carrying a pot of succulents and her usual sass. "Thought your table needed more life, and no offense, Evelyn. But the dusty plastic fern in the corner has seen things." The three of them laughed. It was loud and unapologetic and didn't require translation. For the first time in years, Evelyn's home felt like hers. Not a guest space for Daniel, not a storage unit for Olivia's ambitions, just hers, full of life. Mismatched napkins, and people who showed up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Scene. The letter from rehab later that week. A cream-colored envelope arrived, no return address, just her name, written in Daniel's familiar handwriting. She sat at her kitchen table, hands trembling slightly as she opened it. "Mom, I know I've said sorry before, but this time, I need to explain why. I never saw how much you gave because I never had to live without it. I'm in week 4 of the program. I'm sober. I'm scared. I miss my kids. I miss myself. I miss you. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to say I understand now. And I hope one day, Mabi, we can have coffee. Just as people. Love." Daniel Evelyn read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer where she kept a picture of him as a toddler, chubby cheeks, chocolate around his mouth, looking at her like she was the whole world. She didn't cry, she didn't respond, but she felt something soften. Seeing a Christmas of her own December returned again. No phone call, no text, no invitation, and that was okay. This year, Evelyn hosted her own Christmas dinner, her table set with hand-sewn placemats, thrifted china, and a honey-glazed ham that made the whole house smell like her childhood. Rosa brought a pear tart. Joe brought his terrible eggnog and worse jokes to peas. Evelyn toasted, raising her glass, and to starting over even when you thought you were too old for new beginnings. They clinked glasses, laughed, ate too much at the end of the night. Rosa handed Evelyn a small box, inside a watercolor travel set and a blank sketch pad. Time to start painting again. She said, "Your life isn't over, hon. It just needed a new canvas." Evelyn didn't answer. She just hugged her. Scene epilogue. The window seat. Weeks later. Evelyn sat by her window with a cup of chamomile tea and her new sketch pad. The street outside was quiet, lined with bare trees and children's bikes tipped against fences. She dipped her brush into the soft blue and began to paint the horizon as it faded into evening. Her phone buzzed beside her. A picture message, Luke and Emma in front of a snowman. The caption read, "We made this one for you. Grandma. Miss you." Evelyn smiled. She didn't text back right away. She kept painting. Not because she didn't care, but because for once she wasn't rushing to be needed. She was choosing to be whole. Closing thought forgiveness, she realized, didn't always look like reunion. Sometimes it looked like space, like choosing peace over proximity. And in that space, Evelyn finally found her freedom. The story concludes here, but Evelyn's life, it's only just begun.